Good afternoon, beautiful people. I just got back from New York and I'm finally over the jet lag. A lot of news coming thick and fast in the NFL this week, so let's get into it. So my bluff this week comes from Dripfo in Connecticut from Discord. Thank you, my friend. So the NFL hired 8 head coaches last year, but only one of them had a winning season. I don't think there were 8 new head coaches last season, to be honest. I think that's actually a bit much. Mine immediately goes to Dan Campbell of the Lions. Obviously, he didn't have a winning season. Brandon Staley, obviously, hired for the Chargers, had a 9-8 season after they lost to the Raiders in that beautiful loss in the last game of the season that kicks him out of the playoffs. I'm not biased in any way, shape, or form. David Culley of the Texans definitely didn't have a winning season. And then, obviously Nick Sirianni of the Eagles had a 9-8 season. So, that's definitely false. Can't think of who the other head coaches were that were hired, but that's definitely false. Yeah! Oh, beautiful. We're 2 for 2. Okay, correct 2 weeks in a row. Love that. So the guys I forgot, Arthur Smith for the Falcons, didn't have a winning season. Robert Saleh for the Jets. And then, obviously, the enigmatic Urban Meyer for the Jags, who didn't even finish the season. So, I'm quite happy with that one. So, news around the NFL at the moment. The NFL and NFL Players Association has suspended all COVID protocols for the 2022 season. There's no more mandatory testing of any players and staff. No more face coverings needed, regardless of vaccination status either. Lots of franchise tags in the last week. David Njoku for the Browns, Jesse Bates for the Bengals, Dalton Schultz for the Cowboys. Then the Packers, after signing Rodgers to his monster contract, have franchise tag Devontae Adams. Jaguars Cam Robinson for the second consecutive year, Chiefs Orlando Brown, Dolphins Mike Gesicki, and then Bucks Chris Godwin also for the second year in a row. Speaking of receivers and fast players, we actually had the fastest combine in NFL history, with an average 40 time of 4.71 seconds. Top performers were cornerback Kalen Barnes with a 4.23, which was actually the second fastest in NFL history. Tariq Woolen, cornerback, with a 4.26, and then the fastest wide receiver was Tyquan Thornton with a 4.28. On the back of talking about wide receivers, Calvin Ridley was suspended for the entire 2022 NFL season for betting on games. Ridley bet $1,500 over a 5-day stretch when he wasn't with the team in November 2021. The NFL says it uncovered no evidence to say Ridley used any inside information, but they obviously have a zero tolerance when it comes to betting on sports and betting on the NFL to retain the integrity of the league. In terms of trades, it was a bit of a crazy week for trades. So Khalil Mack was traded to the Chargers for a 2022 second-round pick and a 2023 third-round pick. In quarterback news, Carson Wentz was traded to the Commanders for a 2022 third-round pick and a 2023 third-round pick if Wentz plays more than 70% of the Commanders' plays during the season. Both teams also send a 2022 second-round pick, so that was the Colts to the Commanders. Biggest news, not only in the NFL in terms of trades, but also one of the biggest trades I'd have to say in NFL history is Russell Wilson being traded from the Seahawks to the Broncos. So the Broncos send quarterback Drew Lock, tight end Noah Fant, D-line Shelby Harris, as well as 2 first-round picks, one in 2022 and another in 2023. They also send 2 second-round picks, one in 2022 and one in 2023, and also a 2022 fifth-round pick. The Seahawks send Wilson along with a 2022 fourth-round pick. So in the theme of talking about picks, we're going to be talking about a potential number 1 overall pick as our spotlight player this week. Aiden Hutchinson. So he's a defensive end who's 21 years old, 6'6", and 265 pounds. Hutchinson played for the Michigan Wolverines in college, where in 2021 he broke the team sack record by having 14 sacks on the season. He was also a Heisman Trophy finalist, finishing second behind quarterback Bryce Young. I mean, from watching his tape, this is a pretty impressive dude in terms of physicality. I can see he has some incredible power. Some of the plays he's easily blowing up 300-plus pound offensive linemen like it's absolutely nothing. He's also incredibly quick, especially for quite a big dude, at beating blocks, and he uses that quickness to set up offensive linemen, going from outside to inside. So he'll set them up like he's going outside, and then he sees that lane open up inside, and then he'll cut back and get himself to the quarterback. I think, though, despite his physical attributes, the most impressive thing with him are his techniques. He uses his power and quickness, but combines it with really sort of instinctive hand play to break off blocks and get past offensive linemen. He's also very good at dipping his shoulder and getting under the offensive lineman so he can drive with his legs. That's where he can utilize that power, which is a lot of fun to watch and quite impressive. Not only in pass rushing, but in run defense, he's very instinctive when it comes to run defense. Like I spoke about Evan Neal last week and sort of said about his decision making and how it can be quite inconsistent, but that's sort of one of the big positives I can see with Aiden Hutchinson is that he's very instinctive when it comes to sort of knowing the gaps and where the running back's going to go and committing to it and getting there and making big plays. Off the back of that, there's no really consistent weaknesses. There's kind of a few missed tackles where he took bad angles, and sometimes he struggles a bit against the sort of bigger, long-armed guys on the O-line. But I think, to be honest, like it's so inconsistent that it's not something that happens often. I think that's something that could be coached out of him. And I think especially with his power and that, and the kind of base raw technique talent he sort of weirdly has, and the way he can drive under the tackles and under those long arm reach guys, I think he's always going to get wins against these guys anyway. So there's just a bit of coaching that is needed to sort of get rid of some of those inconsistencies. For me, he's a very complete player. He's a very complete player just as he is, and he reminds me actually a lot of Joey Bosa, sort of that big size, athleticness, technique. So it's going to be really good to watch him when he gets drafted, and yeah, would not be surprised if he goes 1 overall. Speaking of Chargers players, so my plays of the week this week come from Justin Herbert, obviously the quarterback for the Chargers. Happy birthday to him. His birthday was yesterday. Actually the same as my mum, but my mum isn't part of the plays of the week this week, so we'll move on and chat about Justin Herbert instead. So first play comes versus the Giants, week 14 last season. 3rd and 11, Herbert scrambles out the pocket and throws a deep shot to Jalen Guyton for a 59-yard touchdown. A lot of people said this was just their favourite play of the season. It's an absolutely beautiful pass. Like, if you watch the camera just looks like it keeps on panning because of just how far he threw the ball and how accurate it was. So it's such a cool play to watch. Then the other play of his was actually versus Denver in week 17. So Herbert sits in the pocket on a 3rd down and 3 and throws a deep shot to Mike Williams, who makes a diving catch for a 45-yard touchdown. Again, just a beautiful throw, a very good play. They dominated the Broncos in that game. And Williams got re-signed to a 3-year, $60 million deal last week. So I'm sure that's not the last of those deep touchdowns we're going to see. I'll tweet out these plays on my Twitter later so you guys can take a look at it. Now, continuing the theme of talking about quarterbacks this week, because after everything that's happened in terms of trades and that, I think it's silly not to. It's time to talk about some of the controversies and some of the decisions that have been made and what's been going on in the NFL. So I think first of all, Russell Wilson to Denver. It took a bit of thinking about this to kind of get my decision around, whether I thought it was good, who I thought won the trade, all that kind of stuff. But I think now it's good for both teams. The Seahawks kind of seem like they've gone into a full rebuild mode. They've kind of teetered on being this very good elite team for the past few years, but they haven't actually looked, at least in my eyes, like a Super Bowl contender since they lost that Super Bowl to the Patriots. And that was even with Russell Wilson at quarterback that whole time. I think they're going to stack up the picks and rebuild at this point. Like, obviously, the draft capital that they got for Russell is pretty incredible and pretty astounding, as well as the 3 players that they got as well. So I think it's good for the Seahawks because if they've committed to going into the full rebuild mode, now they've got their picks, they've got their capital, they can start building their team the way they want to build it now. And they've got a few young players kind of on the team to build around that. Off the back of this, obviously, they released Bobby Wagner, and I think that's a shame because even in rebuild mode, which it looks like the Seahawks are going to, he's still a fantastic player, and he'd also be an incredible veteran presence for the young guys who they're going to draft. Obviously, although he's 31, he's still been playing at an all-pro level for years now. He's been so consistently one of the best backers in the league. And so I think that would be good, obviously, for young guys coming in to have that veteran presence. But I obviously understand that he is 31, and by releasing him, they save $16.6 million against the cap. So it's a good decision if you're just looking at going, right, complete rebuild, let's get rid of everything, let's go from there. And to be honest, releasing him, there's a lot of contenders who are already interested in signing him. So it's hardly like he's going to be stuck. He's going to literally have a pick of teams to go to and is obviously going to play well wherever he goes. So I think it was kind of an amicable way of him finishing his Seahawks career. Like, we know that Wagner and Wilson are synonymous with the Seahawks, but you got to move on sometimes. You got to commit to these things and try something different. Obviously, the Seahawks haven't been back to the Super Bowl in quite a few years now, so you got to just. I'm very much a believer of, if it's not working, then just try and do something different. It's pointless sticking with the same thing. And obviously, the other side of this, Denver obviously doing something different. They're going kind of with the Rams approach. You see a good play, you want. Never mind going for picks which are going to be potentially good players. Just commit to it. Just go after the player you want. Denver obviously thought they were a quarterback away from a Super Bowl. Now they've got their quarterback. Maybe that's it. These picks, there's no chance that just because you pick a quarterback in the first round, that's going to be it. They're going to be your starter forever and you found your guy. There's no guarantees there. So instead, go after the player you think is going to take you to the promised land. And don't worry about the draft capital. Exactly what the Rams did, and they went out and won a Super Bowl. I mean, Wilson's only 33, and now he gets an improved O-line to work with, so obviously he's put into a good position. Seahawks get a lot of draft capital, so yeah, I think it was definitely good for both teams. In the opposite of that, not necessarily good for both teams, was obviously the Wentz trade to Washington. I don't think it's really going to take Washington over the hump, but obviously they still have their first and second rounders this season, and Wentz is definitely an upgrade on Taylor Heineke. Problem is, obviously, Wentz has never really improved that decision-making of his to be consistent. If you get good Wentz, he makes these beautiful throws, beautiful plays, he's good under pressure, and, you can trust the guy. But when he decides to make his bonehead moves and just turn the ball over for the sake of it and do these things, it just puts the team in bad positions, and you don't know week to week what Carson Wentz you're going to get. So it's an improvement, but is it really going to suddenly turn the Washington Commanders into a contender? No. Do they think that? If they do, they're a bit delusional, but, each to their own. And obviously for the Colts, it gives them some draft capital, but they don't have a first rounder this season, so it doesn't look like they're going to find their quarterback unless they obviously trade or sign for a veteran. I think they're in quite a good position for maybe Garoppolo, because as a game manager, which I've mentioned before, there's a lot of pieces in the Colts, for example, O-line, receivers, running back on that offense that can kind of breed success for Garoppolo. He's got the pieces around him so I think he'd be quite a good fit. There's been talks of maybe Garoppolo going to the Steelers, but I don't think that the pieces are there necessarily on the Steelers. They don't have the O-line. They've got good receivers, but I don't think they're really in the position to have someone like Garoppolo sort of breed them success. And I also think it's kind of pointless. I don't think the Steelers are good enough to basically go, let's rock with Garoppolo and that's all of a sudden going to take us over the hump. There's been maybe talks about Mitch Trubisky for the Steelers or Mason Rudolph, but I think either of these, again, are hardly the option. Seems kind of pointless to have a season with an underwhelming quarterback, especially when the Steelers have their first round pick this season. I think you're better off, especially with a coach like Mike Tomlin, you're better off going with a young player in the draft who then can learn under Tomlin, because Tomlin's worked with a young quarterback before and worked with a few different young quarterbacks over the years. So I think, to be honest for me, and I've seen this on quite a few mock drafts, it's Desmond Ridder. He seems to be the consensus for the Steelers as a pick in the draft where the Steelers are picking. I think the things that strikes me with Ridder, he seems like quite a great leader, which I think the Steelers need with a new quarterback. And I say they've obviously got quite a lot of young players. Veteran presence a lot on defense, for example, like TJ Watt and then Cam Hayward. But I think on offense, it's good to have a young guy coming who already has that kind of natural leadership. The thing is with Ridder, I don't think he's necessarily, it might be a little bit of a reach in the first round, because his footwork's kind of scatty. I think he's got a lot of the tools there, but he just needs to work on setting his feet. And I think if you pair him with such an experienced coach like Mike Tomlin, I think Mike Tomlin will be able to bring the best out of him. And I think we'll get a good player basically there. And I think obviously if you've got leadership plus Mike Tomlin's support, he's in a position to succeed. If he doesn't get picked in the first round, he's definitely going to be a steal after the first round. But I think personally, draft Ridder and bring in someone like Ryan Fitzpatrick. Low money contracts, you're not massively against cap space. Fitzpatrick's been playing well over the last few seasons. Obviously, he's got a lot of leadership and a veteran presence, so not only will it be good for the team, it will be also good for Ridder's development. So I think personally that's the kind of way that the Steelers should go with it. In terms of not so low moneyed contract, I think it has to be mentioned of Rodgers' new deal. So 4 years, $200 million, $153 million guaranteed. I sort of mentioned this last week and said, obviously, it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. You've obviously got an MVP quarterback coming back. You make him the highest paid player in the league, and that's obviously great, but then obviously that hits you against your cap space. So his original contract was set to eat up nearly 22% of Green Bay's cap space in 2022 at just under $47 million next season, but with the new contract, it's actually lower. So basically, I've done a bit of research into this, and so how it works with teams restructuring contracts is so they convert percentages of the contracts into signing bonuses. So that means the signing bonus, that means the money is fully guaranteed against injury. So with Rodgers' contract, $153 million of that money is guaranteed regardless of if he gets injured or not. So what teams can do is basically say they want to free up $7 million cap space next season. They can go, right, we'll convert $7 million more of Rodgers' contract to a signing bonus, and then we can spread that out over the next 3 years. So basically what you do is you just kind of backload the contract, and then you put the money off for the next 3 years. So they free up $7 million for this season, but then the 3 years after, you add on a split of the $7 million over those 3 seasons. So obviously this is good, because if you're in a position where very much the Green Bay Packers kind of seem like they still want to win now, it's good because you can basically backload Rodgers' contract for the last 2 years and offload and keep some cap space for the next 2 seasons. So you'll be on the hook for a lot of money in the last 2 seasons, but it means that in the next 2 seasons you can still re-sign the players that you want to re-sign. The problem is if you don't win that Super Bowl and don't actually make the most of that win now situation, you end up with a situation like the Falcons with Matt Ryan. So in 2018, Matt Ryan signed a 5-year, $150 million contract. Last season, his cap hit was meant to be around $40 million, but they restructured it so it was just over $26 million. Problem is now, next season, his cap's going to be close to $50 million, and the most for a team in NFL history. And if you look at the Falcons, it's hardly like last season. They've come from Super Bowl winners now, and now it's a fall from grace. They haven't been good for the last couple of years. So you see what happens is now they're in cap hell. Obviously, you can only restructure a big contract like that for a certain amount of time. So with the Green Bay Packers, it kind of seems like they've done this with Rodgers. They've committed. Rodgers is now happy. They've franchise tagged Adams, so he gets Adams back. They've still got the cap space over the next couple of seasons to be able to sign players and hopefully finally get that Super Bowl that's kind of been elusive for them the last few seasons, even though they've got the pieces there. And then, yeah, obviously you keep Rodgers happy with the amount of money. And then maybe when he gets into his 40s, the back end of his contract, you're paying more of that money and you've obviously back-ended the signing bonuses and the guaranteed money. But by that point, maybe he's getting to the twilight of his career. He's thinking, actually, I'm going to be retiring soon. You draft in a young guy, you sort of rebuild from there. So you focus more on young guys and draft picks, and then it doesn't really matter as much. But obviously, before that point, the Packers need to win that Super Bowl, and I'm sure Rodgers wants to get that Super Bowl before that happens, or he's not going to be happy, and he's just going to sort of take the money and go, well, I've got my money, but I didn't get that extra part of my legacy. So it's interesting to see how teams restructure stuff and restructure these contracts, but obviously, if it doesn't work out, you don't get your Super Bowl, then you're still on the hook for all of that money. And obviously, if you're paying more money to a player, say, for example, Rodgers regresses over time, you're still on the hook for that money because it's guaranteed. So with a player, it makes it a lot harder to release them or do whatever you want with that player. So yeah, don't think Rodgers will regress, but hopefully the Green Bay Packers can get that Super Bowl that they've clearly won by making this deal and doing what they're doing. So finally, my album of the week this week. So my album of the week this week is the Neverly Boys' Dark Side of Everything. This is definitely a bit of a rogue one. I discovered them on Spotify. So Spotify just gives you your, suggested albums. And basically what I do is I always go on there and I'll listen to, the first song. And if I like the first song, then I'll listen to the second and so on. And if I don't like the first song, then usually I know I'm probably not going to like the album. So I leave it and just move on to the next one. And so with this album, listened to the first song, loved it. Second song, loved it. Third song, loved it. And so on. And got all the way to the end of the album and absolutely loved it. Also, bought the vinyl for it, and I don't know how many people probably own the vinyl, but I'm proud to say that I'm one of maybe about 500 to 1,000 people who own the vinyl of it, and it's great. So yeah, Neverly Boys, Dark Side of Everything, little indie, little rock, quite fun, definitely give that a go. Thanks for listening, everyone. This was episode 2 of the Clutchdown podcast. Follow me on the Twitter, which is @ClutchdownPod. I'll be sharing information about the NFL, previews of episodes and so on, and also any of the plays of the week that I've discussed during the episode. Hope you all have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week.